let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
As the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed,
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours live stream. I am Andrew Sullivan, and I am sadly not joined today by my co-host, Mr. Jonny Rickard. Jonny, for better or for worse, has a real job. I mean, I guess we all have real jobs, but we don't consider the live stream to be a real job. So he's doing a workshop with a customer today, so it is all-consuming, I think, both today and tomorrow, and he's not able to join us. But fortunately, I have three of the smartest people I know joining me today, and I say that in all seriousness. Y'all are rock stars, and I am humbled and awed every time I have interactions with y'all. Y'all are also no strangers to the live stream. We were chatting just a little bit ago. I think, Ali, I know you've been on here at least twice. Sam's been on before. Gerald's been on before, and is also a pretty well-known rock star in the GitOps world as well. So I feel I'm very happy to have y'all join us. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, and so today's topic is, let's see, OpenShift Dynamic Plugins, which is a console feature, the OpenShift admin console feature that was added. Ali, I want to say we talked about it in like 4.10 or 4.11 was when it first started becoming available, and it's evolved now. You know, we're at 4.16. And Gerald has done some amazing work to have a dynamic plugin specifically for GitOps. So we're kind of bringing two topics together here to showcase some pretty amazing capabilities. So I'm excited about it. I'm very interested to see what we have to show here. So thank you again for joining us. So normally this would be the time where Jonny and I banter back and forth a little bit and chat about the weather. It's beautiful here in Raleigh, by the way. I don't know what's happening. I am extremely alarmed about the. It's now late August and it's like 75 and not humid. 75 Fahrenheit for any of the metric users. But yeah, it's gorgeous outside, and I actually have the back door open. There's a nice breeze flowing through. Jonny would be normally talking about how ridiculously and uncomfortably hot it is in Texas because Texas. But yeah, I will digress from all of that. Top of mind topics. I had a couple of things. I lost them in the process of doing this. There is one thing that I did want to highlight though, because I was literally just responding to questions on this. So OpenShift virtualization, as it's been gaining popularity, we have had a number of different things and a number of different questions come up around like, hey, how do I enable my clusters? In particular, when I'm doing OpenShift on OpenShift. So I'm deploying virtual OpenShift clusters onto physical OpenShift clusters. So there's a couple of rules to be aware of here, just as a reminder. So one, virtual OpenShift clusters, the compute nodes, always need to use core-based entitlements. So they don't inherit entitlements or subscriptions from the underlying physical servers. So wherever the applications are running, wherever your applications are running, that is the nodes that need to be entitled, whether they're virtual or physical. So the bare metal entitlements apply to physical servers up to 64 cores, and that hyperthreads don't matter there. Or SMT, as AMD calls it. So 64 physical cores, doesn't matter if there's however many logical cores are associated with it. I will note that we recently updated the subscription guide to be more explicit on all of these rules as well. So if you haven't looked at the subscription guide in a while, and I will find that link right now. If you have not looked at the subscription guide, I would definitely encourage you to give it a look. And we've made some, hopefully, clarifications and just easier to digest things in there. The other thing to point out, if you are, so let's say that today you have OpenShift, virtual OpenShift running in Red Hat virtualization or, wherever you're running it at, and you want to move those virtual OpenShift clusters into OpenShift or onto OpenShift virtualization, From a bare metal server perspective, if that is the only workload that's running there, you're only running other OpenShift clusters, that underlying bare metal cluster is considered infrastructure. You don't need additional entitlements for it. So effectively what that means is I'm paying the exact same amount, whether it's, my virtual OpenShift cluster is hosted in Rev or VMware or OpenStack or wherever, as if I move it over into OpenShift virtualization from an OpenShift perspective, but I'm no longer having to, I no longer have to use that capacity in my other hypervisor. So lots of cool stuff there. I know Jonny's talked about hosted control planes, and we've shown those a few times. Hosted control planes are really cool, but optional. Everybody always asks, like the first question that comes to mind usually is, well, what happens if the cluster hosting the control planes fails? And I'm happy to say that there is an entire section of the documentation for hosted control planes and ACM that talks about exactly that scenario and exactly like if this fails, this is what's affected, and like all of this other stuff. So it's a great resource that I don't have a link to right now. So in a moment, I will dig up that link and I will paste it into the chat here. So there, I didn't have any top of mind things. I've made 2 top of mind things up off the top of my head, which feels like that's how it should go, right? All right. So I'm going to ask y'all to quickly introduce yourselves, and I'm just going to go in the order that's on my screen here. So Sam, Gerald, and Ali. Again, welcome y'all to the stream, and please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sam Padgett. I'm a front-end architect here at Red Hat. I've been working on OpenShift Console in one capacity or another for over 9 years now, almost 10 years. And I was one of the people behind the plugins that we've got, and really excited to see the demo from Gerald. I actually haven't seen it, so looking forward to that. And we'd love to hear your feedback on it.
Okay, my name's Gerald Nunn. I am the GitOps Technical Marketing Manager at Red Hat. So in that capacity, I help customers and our field team leverage Argo CD to its maximum capability to accomplish their goals. By trade, I'm a Java developer, but I've learned a lot of TypeScript with these plugins, and that's been a fun experience. So looking forward to sharing it with everybody.
Awesome. And hey, folks, Ali Mobram here. I am the OCP Console Product Manager. I've been at Red Hat for at least, I think, over 5 years now. It's been very exciting to be here and work with these fantastic folks, especially Sam and Gerald. Gerald's done some awesome things, and we are very, very excited to kind of come in and let him showcase that today. So I'm just going to hand it back to him and let him rip.
Yeah, and Sam and Ollie, I mentioned before that y'all had been here, and we were showing some early potential associated with console plugins. And at the time, and even now, I'm excited for the prospect of seeing this possible not only for our partners, but for customers who want to bring in, hey, I've got this, I don't know, a third-party monitoring web page, and I just want to, wrap that web page into my OpenShift console so that I don't have to, jump around all the time. Just simple things like that, all the way into, I think I think we're all going to be very impressed by what Gerald has to show us here in a moment. So, all the way to more advanced things like that. Hopefully, I'm not setting you up to fail here, Gerald. Jonny's not here to, what's the thing? What was that movie? Bullet Train with Brad
Pitt.
Brad Pitt, he's talking about the ladybug, and it's like, ladybugs aren't lucky. It's just the ladybug attracts all of the bad luck or something like that. That's Jonny when it comes to demos. Jonny attracts all the bad luck when it comes to demos, and hopefully I'm not jinxing it by pointing that out.
All right,
So,
knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood, exactly.
should be fine. I did a quick run through beforehand, so.
Yeah.
One thing before you start, you were absolutely right. Dynamic plugins did come in 4.10. So we've had several releases since we put it out there. We've seen lots of uptake. It's great to see how and what people are creating. And the fact that you actually kind of hit the nail on the head, which is the number one requested thing that we get is the single pane of glass. Don't make me go into another UI to go do some, just a small little task that I need to do. Don't make me make me remember the URL. My credentials might be different. I just want to do everything right here because I'm already working here and make it easy. So that is the main goal of why we did the dynamic plugin framework. So to enable all these external teams or internal teams at Red Hat, and then partners and then customers build their own experiences as well. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, and the single pane that you referenced is near and dear to my heart, and I say that because quite literally, I was last night I was messing with my home lab. I'm, being as Johnny loves to say, we're all nerds, right? So in my home lab, I self-host a whole bunch of things, and so I was going through and I wanted to create a landing page that has all of my things on it and stuff like that, and I get tired of either bookmarking or trying to remember all of the different URLs and ports and everything else. And to your point, right? Give me one place where I can go and see all of these things, even if it is just a wrapper. It's that one central place. It makes the admin's life or the developer's life that much easier. So I'll quit rambling, and I will hand over to you, Gerald.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay.
And I got a very small handful of slides just to set the stage, but we've actually done a pretty good job of setting the stage already, in my opinion.
Well, we bill by the slide, so
yeah, death by PowerPoint. So really just wanted to set the stage about, what is an OpenShift Console dynamic plugin? And really, as we've kind of alluded to already, it provides a mechanism to extend the OpenShift console. So in the OpenShift console, there are a number of different ways to tailor it, provide a different experience. Like you can set a different logo, for example, in the console. You can see a little bit in the screenshot here, this blue bar, that's the banner. So you can set those in the console and add links. But what the dynamic plugin allows you to do is essentially provide completely new UI, user interface, where you have full control over the experience that appears for the user. And that is a really powerful mechanism that can be leveraged in a variety of ways. The cool thing with dynamic plugins is that the code is actually maintained outside of the console, and it's an independent code base, right? So it's not like you have to get the console source code, compile it, write your code against it, and somehow do a PR in the console repository to get your code in there, right? It all runs independently and is packaged as a separate container and deployed as a separate container in the console itself. There's an easy-to-use SDK that has good reference documentation in the OpenShift docs.openshift.com or at access.redhat.com. So it's very easy to understand what extension points and APIs are available to you in order to integrate with both the console itself as well as the underlying Kubernetes OpenShift cluster. And some common examples of a plugin, OpenShift Data Foundation. When you install that, you see the storage in the storage menu. There's a bunch of new items that show up for it. Virtualization is a fantastic dynamic plugin that I reference all the time in my own and steal code from it constantly because those guys do a fantastic job with it. Dell Apex, in terms of an example, I got a slide showing a picture of that on the next one, as a partner that is integrated with the console and done it. And the key thing I really want people to take away is that, as Andrew alluded to earlier, anyone can create a plugin, right? It does not take a Red Hatter to make a plugin. Partners can make these plugins and customers can make these plugins as well. It's a quite easy process. And I say that as somebody that is definitely not a TypeScript developer. As I mentioned at the start, my background is in Java, and it was pretty easy to pick up TypeScript and a bit of React and get started. And we'll see that when we go through the demos. So why OpenShift dynamic plugins? And again, Andrew did a great job of kind of leading into that. Really, depending on where you're coming from, if you're a partner and you want to integrate your solution fully into OpenShift and provide it as part of that single pane of glass that the console gives our users, then a plugin is a great way to bring your solution into the console with a native user look and feel that looks like it's just part of the overall experience, right? And that's a very powerful capability for partners. And for customers, Red Hat provides essentially a batteries included distribution with OpenShift, but we fully recognize that customers will be using other products as part of the overall solution in their space, in their ecosystem. And again, it can be really handy and useful to be able to create these interfaces and plug them into the console to give them accessibility to your users and be able to leverage those products that you're using to the fullest extent possible with its own UI. So from a use case perspective, Dell Apex, if you're not familiar with it, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on it, Andrew probably is much more familiar with it than I am, but essentially it's packaging OpenShift as part of an appliance called Apex that is sold by Dell. And what Dell has done is they've essentially provided a dynamic plugin that allows you to interact with the underlying hardware and understand what's going on with it. So you can see, for example, here, they give you what the CPU usage is, the memory usage, some alerts and things that are going on from a hardware perspective, etc. Really providing that first-class experience in the OpenShift console in terms of being able to manage the platform as a whole, including the underlying appliance that OpenShift is running on. So it's a great example of what you can do with this capability, even if you're not part of Red Hat or you're not a Red Hatter, right? Anybody can create this stuff.
Yeah, and Gerald, you mentioned the virtualization plugin as well as Dell Apex. There's also ODF. So the ODF folks have a plugin as well, where you can go in and see what's happening at the storage layer. I know the IBM Fusion folks have one for managing both Fusion. I can never keep these things straight. There's Fusion HCI, so the very much like Apex, the hardware platform, as well as for doing things like backups and disaster recovery, stuff like that. So we're seeing more and more of these happening, and that's just the two that I'm aware of off the top of my head, or in addition to these. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been awesome seeing people leverage this capability and do more with it. And this is just a reference page to help people get started. As I mentioned, the documentation is available in docs.redhat.com or docs.openshift.com, as well as access.redhat.com. And there's a great starting template here that Sam has put together. You can essentially just clone this repo and then start building off of it to create your own plugin, right? So it essentially provides a out-of-the-box a plugin that you can just run right away, plug into the console, and then tailor it and improve it as you see fit in order to provide the experience that you're looking for. And that is basically how I started with plugins, is I just forked that repo and then started building things on top of it as needed. So it's a fantastic starting point. And you can see here the QVert plugin is also linked. And as mentioned previously, I use that one all the time as a reference, right? Whenever I'm scratching my head wondering, how do I do this or how do I do that? Inevitably, I go to the QVert one and see how they did it, and then basically steal their solution and bring it into my own plugin as needed. The power of open source, right?
Nice.
So at this point, we'll do a demonstration. Hopefully it'll be a demonstration, not a demolition, as the picture here shows. We're going to go through a couple things. I'll show a simple plugin that adds some menu items to the console. And then we'll do a deep dive on my GitOps plugin, which is a much more involved plugin that covers Argo CD, rollouts, and a little bit of external secrets. We'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges around that plugin, particularly around Kubernetes RBAC versus the native Argo CD RBAC. And at the end of the day, we're definitely looking for feedback on this GitOps plugin as well, in terms of what sort of user experience, if any, customers and users are looking for in the OpenShift console when it comes to GitOps. Since Argo CD already has a very capable UI, and we find a lot of people really enjoy that and use it, we're kind of trying to figure out what we want to do in the console with respect to GitOps longer term. So that's the slides.
And Gerald, we got a question here from Dwayne. Is anyone using Dell Apex for digital twin implementation? I don't know that we know enough about how customers are using it to know that. So I say that because it's Dell folks who are selling those. They understand what their customers are doing with it better than we do. It's OpenShift on top, but we can't see into their platform or what their workloads are.
Yeah, I have no clue.
Yeah.
Malek,
trying to install OKD to control plane 3 worker for home lab. Can I use Raspberry Pi 5 for the 5 bare metal machines? So a couple of things. So OpenShift, including OKD, you can either have one control plane node, so single node OpenShift, or you have to have 3 or more nodes. So 3 control plane nodes plus 0 or more worker nodes, basically. So there's no in between or no option for 2 control plane nodes yet. We did have a few episodes ago, we did have on William Caban, I think, to talk about other potential options that are on the roadmap or way down on the roadmap for doing 2, 4, 5 node control planes, etc. So Raspberry Pi 5s, I don't think will work because I think it's only ARM64 that OpenShift supports, and I don't think that the Raspberry Pi uses that ARM architecture. But oh yeah, okay, 3 control plane plus 2 worker. Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, I don't think it supports that ARM architecture, but I don't know which ARM architecture that is off the top of my head. I don't know if Ollie or Gerald or Sam, if you know off the top of your head. Okay.
No.
Yeah, it's worth a shot. Like I said, it's OpenShift supports ARM64. So if it is ARM64, then it might work. Particularly in modern versions, we're doing a lot to reduce the footprint with what we call composable OpenShift. So you'd be able to go in and basically say, don't deploy certain things. But I still think that the requirements are going to be pushing the boundaries for a Pi 5 for a full OpenShift deployment.
I was actually looking at getting a Pi 5 from Microshift, but ended up going x86 with a B-Link instead, just to get a little bit more power for that system.
Yeah, I know. I need to get hands-on with Microshift. I need to get to learn more about it just to have my own self-knowledge. I've been doing a lot of stuff with strangely Podman on just individual hosts lately, and using Podman and systemd units in order to deploy things and stuff like that. But
I'm doing a blog on bootstrapping Microshift with ACM and GitOps, so I'm happy to come back and talk about it at some point if you want.
Yeah, home lab stuff is always interesting to me, and I know, like Malek, people are always wanting to learn OpenShift, and anytime I feel like we can have topics that cover, like, hey, you don't need a full enterprise setup, you don't need to spend thousands of dollars for a server, or hundreds of dollars a month for to rent one. You can do it with regular old hardware. So yeah, I think anytime we can do that, we should do that. Maybe we should have a home lab party, here on the live stream. There's a ton of folks here in Red Hat who do home labs. So
that would be awesome.
Yeah. Do you have any hardware recommendations for a small OpenShift OKD cluster? It depends on what you want to do with it. If you just want to do like application deployment type things and a single node is okay. I think the minimum now is 4 CPU and 12 or 16 gigabytes of memory to deploy single node OpenShift. And then everything after that would be available for your applications. If you want to do like a more clustered type of thing, it's I think 2 CPU or 2 or 4 CPU for. Let me see here. I'm gonna hijack your share briefly here.
Oh, go ahead.
Share. So if we go to the docs and we look at installing, and we come all the way down here to any platform, and we scroll down, it lists the minimum resource requirements. So if I do a quote unquote compact cluster where it's only 3 nodes and the nodes are both control plane and compute nodes, it would be the sum of these two. So 6 CPUs and 24 gigabytes of memory is the recommended minimum. Technically, you could probably get away with a little bit less than that, but remember, then you're eating into application space. So, go on, pick your web retailer of choice, and find Gerald. You said like a B-Link box. You can get those relatively inexpensively. I know that threshold is different for everyone, but you can do something like that, or alternatively, and what I've historically done is I just have like old desktops and laptops, and I use KVM on top of that, and I just create VMs inside of there and join them all together, into a cluster. So that's certainly an option as well. I know a number of folks. Jonny, I think, has like one big server that he just carves up into virtual machines and uses it. And Jacob, if you're here from a Dell perspective, somebody was asking about Dwayne up above was asking about using Dell Apex for digital twins. And maybe you have some hardware suggestions, just throwing that out there. Mm-hmm. All right. Sorry for the distraction there, Gerald, or sorry to interrupt you. Let's see. I need to turn off my share. Come on. And turn on your share.
So while Gerald's bringing this thing up, I just wanted to add to the fact that you don't have to replicate your whole UI in console, especially if you're a partner or whatnot. But it is nice to have the integration points and bring key information in, and then link it back out if your users need to get more detailed information or whatever. So it's also like a convenience factor of, I'm already in the console, I'm looking at something, oh, I need more information. I don't have to go to your UI, find the same context, and then get to it. I have a quick link that'll launch me right into context into your UI, and voila, I just save the customer X amount of time, and they're much happier to go back and forth between the two products. So
Right. And we have extension points all throughout the console. So rather than having your own separate page that's just your things, you can blend seamlessly in. Like for instance, the overview page being shown now, you can extend that and add cards to the overview, or you want to add tabs to existing resource pages, you can do that. So it's a nice way to be able to extend those pages that people are already using, and then they can see your stuff right there without having to navigate to separate pages or separate perspectives.
and then the other use cases, what, I don't want to go build a standalone UI. I could just take advantage of this especially if your world
Right.
is here. So all right, back to you, Gerald.
Okay, so for the first plugin, the really simple one, as Ali knows, I'm not a big fan of the developer perspective. I love the topology view that the developer perspective provides, but I find, at least for my personal workflow, I'm constantly switching between perspectives, in the sense that I could be looking at some pods in the admin perspective, wondering why this thing's not healthy, switch to topology to get an overview of everything in the thing, but then I got to switch perspectives to do that. Or you kind of got to drill into, projects. If I do product catalog prod here, then I can go to workloads and see my topology here. But it's a fair amount of clicks and everything to get there, and I really just wanted to disable the developer perspective, but still make these things accessible. So I've disabled the perspective. As you can see here, you can't switch anymore. And one thing for Ali that I've got an RFE for is to hide this thing when there's only one perspective and save me some screen real estate. I told Ali I was going to call him out on a few things here as I go through. But what I've done is I've got a plugin that adds these items directly under workloads, right? So I can click on topology, and I can see the topology view right away in workloads. Similarly, if I want to leverage the add experience that is in the developer console, I've added that menu item here. And these are really the two things from the developer perspective that are kind of hard to reach or hard to find in the admin perspective. And really what I wanted to do was just surface them so that they're really easy to find and click on, in terms of the workflow that I'm using, where I'm just, looking at pods, looking at deployments, and just want to bounce the topology for a second to check something out or add something. It makes it really easy to do that. And then from an extension point of view, this is really simple to do. So as I mentioned earlier, I took Sam's plugin template, and this was really the first thing I wrote back in 4.13. It has not been touched since, so it's still running that original code, but now running in 4.16 without me upgrading or changing anything from a dependency perspective. And you can see here, is this big enough for folks to see, hopefully?
I was just going to say, you might need to make that a little bigger because it's a little small. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. So the idea really is that the console provides extension points. You can see here, for example, here's an extension point called href, which allows you to add menu items to the left sidebar in the console. And we don't necessarily need to walk through this in super amount of detail, but the idea is that topology is already an existing menu in the console. And what I'm doing is essentially just pointing it to that existing item that's being defined in the console, i.e. where it's located, and adding in it as the href. And then I'm just saying, hey, I want this thing to be in the workload section of the sidebar menu in the admin perspective, which you can see here. And that's where it appears, right at the top. And then similarly for the add one, I do the same thing down here. We just want this in workloads. We want to insert this after topology, so you can control that as well and add that to the menu item. And again, it's using an existing item, so I don't need to write any code or anything just to do this. So you can see the href, the existing add item in the developer perspective. And then the last thing is I'm just adding a section bar down here of the separator that you saw. So it was topology, add, and then there's a separator for more of a clean UI perspective, that's it. At that point, then I can just compile this up, put it into a container, deploy it into my OpenShift environment, and I'm really just off to the races at that point. There is a Helm chart in here that the plugin template provides, so I'm leveraging that as well. If we look at the templates, one of the things that provides is this console plugin kind. This is how you define your plugins and how the OpenShift console itself knows that there's a plugin that does this, or a plugin that you've created. And if you look at the OpenShift environment here, if I do a OC get console plugin, you can see all the different plugins that I've got here. And then in the OpenShift console, you can add and enable them through the GUI as needed. But as you can see, doing something very simple in terms of just rearranging some menu items or changing the flow a little bit is very easy with the extension points that are provided in that console. So that's kind of sorry, go ahead.
I that was a question that I had bubbling in my mind, and I don't know if this is a question for you, Gerald, so much as it is, maybe Sam. Of let's say that I want to rearrange the way that the OpenShift, the default admin console looks like, right? I want to rearrange the order of the things on the left-hand column. Is that possible?
So the way you would do that is probably to create a new perspective. We do have some configuration where you can disable some of the existing perspectives, and you could provide your own through a plugin, and then you can completely control what the left nav looks like. So in general, like the philosophy is plugins tend to be additive. You tend to add new things to the UI rather than changing what's there or removing things, but we do have the capabilities of defining custom perspectives and plugins.
And perspective here is referring to like the admin view, developer view.
Right. That drop down at the top left of the nav, of the left nav. Those are perspectives. So Gerald's disabled the developer one, which is there by default, but you can add your own through plugins.
Gerald, can you? Sorry to interrupt. Gerald, could you actually go to the interface to enable the dev perspective again?
Yeah.
And we'll just show folks how this is done.
Let's
So
see.
sorry, Sam. Didn't mean to interrupt.
And you might need to make that a little bigger, Gerald.
Oh, thank you.
So as you see here, there's the two perspectives right there. You can enable, disable them. You can even disable the administrator perspective, right? So if you just want to make this a developer console and the admins manage it via CLI, that could easily disable that. And then when perspectives are added, they'll be added to this as well, right? So you'll be able to enable, disable your custom perspective, just like the administrator developer perspective.
Yeah, and this change will take a minute or two to happen since it has to roll out a new console pod under the hood. So it'll pop up at some point while we're going through things, and then you'll see it pop up here.
And I guess a tangential question, is it possible for folks to create, I say folks like normal folks like me, to create I don't know if it's a plugin, I don't know what you would consider it, but like what ACM does, where in ACM, I don't know if they are, they have a separate, like there's a tab or a button you can click inside of the OpenShift admin console that jumps over to the ACM console, and you can kind of change those views.
So ACM creates their own perspective as well. And what happens is you will go there and you'll have the all cluster view or the local cluster view, right? So they're dynamically adding that in with their plugin.
Yeah, thank you, Gerald, for showcasing that. So, but this is something that we can add. So this is a different perspective, then, is what you're saying? Is what that is?
Yes.
Interesting. I didn't know how that actually worked behind the scenes. So it's really cool to see all of that becoming available. Outside of, I don't want to say we play inside baseball amongst our own products, but it's more broadly and easily accessible to everyone. So that's really cool. Malik, does OpenShift/OKD consider the low power efficiency cores and efficiency of cores found in newer Intel processors as regular vCPUs? I think so. I don't actually know.
It does.
Okay.
And I think there's some work happening in Kubernetes. I'm not sure where it is in terms of having a better understanding of the difference between efficiency and power cores on the Intel platforms. I was kind of looking into it, Andrew, when I was buying a new machine for my home lab and going, do I want AMD or do I want Intel, right? With AMD, all the CPUs are homogeneous, whereas in Intel, they're not. So I ended up going AMD just for the homogeneous CPUs for now. But I think in the future, Kubernetes, from a scheduling perspective, will have a better understanding of power versus efficiency if it's not there already. I'm not sure what the status of that request is at this point in time.
Yeah, that'd be a good one to know. And I think Johnny and I have chatted about bringing on the folks from, is it the Kepler project? Is that the one that does power management?
Yes.
Yeah, we've talked about bringing them on before, and I can only imagine that they would definitely know the answer to that for sure. Sorry to interrupt, Gerald.
No, it's all good. So that was, just a simple example of a plugin. So let's look at the GitOps plugin. So the GitOps plugin, the intent of it really is, Ali was mentioning earlier, help provide that single pane of glass when you're managing GitOps. It's not intended to be a complete replacement for the Argo CD UI, but what it is meant to be is that if you're in the console, you're trying to figure out why something's not working, and you want to just quickly go and see the application from an Argo CD perspective and what its status is in terms of what's going on, this plugin allows you to do that, right? So when this plugin gets added in, it adds a new menu item called GitOps that you see here, and it adds 3 items to it: application sets, applications, and projects. If I click on applications, I can go to my one of my projects that have the applications, and you can see all the different Argo applications here. I can see the name of it, what the sync status is, what the health status is, what revision this is set for. Normally that could be main, but in my case, I'm using commit pinning. So I'm setting it to a particular tag in my repo in order to manage promotion, and what Argo CD project, which is different than an OpenShift project that it's linked to. I can click on one of these, and then I can see more detailed information in terms of the name, but I also get this nice box here that allows me to punch out and go to Argo CD, just log in, and then I can see the application right here, right? So then if I need the more fully capable Argo CD UI, it's really accessible and easy to get to. You can see, again, the health status, sync status. There'll be an error here if there's a problem with it. And I can also manage the sync policies here in terms of whether the sync policy should be automated, self-heal, and prune. It's very common in Argo CD, as you folks probably know, to want to disable this when you're troubleshooting. So, you can just click that and disable it to then do your troubleshooting, and off you go to the races in terms of managing it. Click that again to set self-heal. You can see the sources. So this will support multi-source as well, which is a new feature in Argo CD. This is where the manifests are being taken from, either a Helm chart or from a Git repo if it's raw manifests or customized. And this points to that. And again, you get punch outs to go to those really quickly and easily as needed. I can see the resources that this application is composed of. So in Argo CD's UI, you get this view here, the tree view that people know, right? And this first level of the tree view is really the resources that Argo is directly managing. The second iterations are really things that Argo is calculating based on ownership references, right? So for me, I'm only showing that first level of the tree, but I can see all the different resources. I can see what the status of each resource is in terms of its sync status and its health status. And again, making it easy to punch out to these things, I can click on details, and it will punch out to that resource and show me, again, that specific view for that specific resource, where I can do a diff and see what's going on with it, right? So again, just really helping to make the Argo CD UI accessible while still providing a capability to do probably 70% of what an administrator would need to do in the in Argo in the console. And of course, you can do things like sync the application. You can stop the operation that's pending if there's a sync or something that's happening. I can refresh, do the refresh hard as well out of the console. So you get all those capabilities here. You can see the sync status. So this is the last sync that happened. I can see that it was okay. They succeeded. And again, I can see the status of the sync from what happened in terms of any errors or messages would pop up here as well. You can see the history of the application. I don't have the capability right now built in to do rollbacks. I'm not a big fan of rollbacking In Argo CD, I prefer to roll forward, which is probably why I haven't bothered adding it. But if people want it, I could certainly look at adding it. So that's, a very quick overview of the applications, but also bring in application sets, which you don't get a UI for in Argo CD at the moment, although it is being worked on. I can click on the tenant one, for example. Again, you get some basic information about the application set, that it's healthy. I can see the generators. So in this case, I've got the Git generator that's generating applications for this. I can see the applications that are associated with this application set, i.e. what it generated. So it makes it easy, again, to kind of quickly go down the rabbit hole and see what resources are being generated out of what, and the normal events. And then finally, there's also UI for app projects to allow you to manage these as well. So I click on the cluster config one. I can see, what's whitelisted and blacklisted in this app project, what the allowed destinations are, the allowed denied lists. You can manage the roles that this one doesn't have any. You can manage the sync windows. And again, I can see the applications that are using this project or are tied to it. So again, making it easy to understand what's going on. So the idea,
so Gerald,
sorry, go.
I have an implementation question, I think, which is, like, one, this is beautiful. Like, I love all of the stuff that you can incorporate here. Right? It shows, it literally is a native integration, and it looks just like, no offense, like it looks like something that's, the developer, the UI UX team had went through and created. So as you're going through and creating each one of these, like, I'm curious about how you actually implemented this inside of the plugin, and defining all these things. It looks like a CRD definition, and it has all the details associated with it. And
yep, good timing, Andrew. I was going to go to the code next, so you're way ahead of me on this
fast
one.
Forward.
No, that's exactly where I was going to go right after you. I just wanted to give a quick overview of the menus and the views that you would get, and then the next part is how did I build those views, right? What was involved in doing that? So similarly, this is my repo here. Similar to what we saw in the last one, there's a console extensions that defines all the extension points that you're hooking into. So similar to what we saw previously, I'm defining menu items, but in this case, I'm using my own menu items and models. So in this case here, for example, I'm adding the application set menu item under the GitOps one, and it's tied to an external module that I've defined and built from a code perspective that is defined in the plugin metadata down here. So if we look at the application set right there, you can see there's some modules that are backing this, right? And those extension points in that console extensions really just point to these external modules. And this is just source code at this point in time, right? And you can see that there's two of them. There's a list and a details. So if I go look at the code, and we go look at source, GitOps, components, application set. So you can see I've got a list tab here, which is that one. And this is just a React component at the end of the day. So I'm writing TypeScript and React code to make this happen. But the framework that Sam has worked so diligently on really provides a lot of things to make this easy for me, right? Like, I don't need to write code to interact with the Kubernetes API. Sam's done all that work for me. Right? I can use this existing API called use Kubernetes watch resource. This will establish a watch on a resource that I'm interested in this case, the application set, and it will automatically monitor that as new application sets get created, as they change, as ones are deleted. This list will automatically get updated, and the UI will automatically refresh to reflect those changes, right? But me as a plugin developer, I don't need to write any of that code. Sam's already done that hard work, right? I can just leverage the work that Sam's done and make this happen, right? So from a code perspective, Andrew, that list that I showed you is like 182 lines of code, right? Mm-hmm. That is not a lot of code to get the functionality that you saw in that view, right?
And can I pause a moment? I just want to touch on your development environment here. So via VS Code, and as you're writing code, you're able to. It's always fascinating to me, and I think Andrew's very heavily on the administrator side. Clearly, this is Ask an OpenShift admin, right? And so it's always interesting to me to see when people are developing things, what that inner loop, outer loop looks like, and sort of the flow that you have going on. Because your goal here is, I write some code, I commit it, I want to rebuild that container, redeploy it into OpenShift, and then let the console refresh so that I can test.
Yep.
And yeah, and so it's always interesting to me to see that those workflows and how people do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for plugin development, we have a much more streamlined process where you can run everything locally. And we have scripts to do this in the template repo that Gerald mentioned earlier. But the simplest way to do it is to run console itself in a container image locally on your laptop, and then you can spin up a Webpack dev server. And again, we have scripts that will just do this automatically for you. And you can have a separate Webpack dev server that's hosting just your plugin. So when you update things, it's watching the files, and when things change, it'll rebuild just your plugin instead of having to rebuild all of console. You don't have to build a container image. You don't have to deploy it to the cluster and everything. You just refresh your browser and you see your change. So it enables you to iterate and develop really quickly. We tried to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm in the back of my head, I'm wondering, like, how is it connecting to the cluster to actually populate things inside of there? If it's running on the local host, or is it just
It's using your existing
Right.
cube context.
okay?
Yeah. For development, like the console itself and your plugin are all running on your laptop. You'll still need an OpenShift cluster, right, for the API server and the resources and everything. But you can do development and everything runs locally. It makes it easy to test with different console versions. It makes it very easy to iterate and change your code and see things live quickly.
That's
what I've done here is I've just started it up, Andrew, for you. So here you can see my plugin is running in this one, and the console pod is actually running in this one. And if I go to my browser, this is the console that I can use for development, right? So as Sam was saying, I can make changes and see those changes right away. It automatically will repackage and not repackage, but deploy the new version of it and keep things in sync, so I can iterate very quickly in terms of developing the user interface.
Right. And under the hood, this is all using Webpack Module Federation. This might be more in the weeds. You need, like, one of the nice things with plugins is you don't need to know all this, but it does allow us you can build your plugin separately, and all the code gets loaded and linked at runtime seamlessly, right? So you can use the existing console image that we provide, that's on Quay. You don't have to rebuild all that. All you have to focus on is like the little bit of plugin code that you're working on.
Yeah. So if you'll let me indulge myself for a moment, this might be a question for you, Ali, of, do we see any use cases for someone like, I don't want to deploy, my OpenShift cluster, I want it to be as lightweight as possible. I don't want to deploy the console, but I want to deploy the console locally and just point it at a remote cluster. So that way I still have that functionality, but without taking up resources on wherever it's running at. Is that a valid use case?
That is a valid use case. We haven't got too many asks for that right now. In this scenario, it's primarily used for increasing your velocity as a developer, right? Versus having to push and wait till the cluster gets updated with the stuff. You can just locally run everything, and then I believe the SAM, and then create a bridge scripts to reach out to that cluster. But so the use case that I keep thinking more about is the HyperShift stuff, right? The HCP, where you may want to run all these child clusters, and there might be smaller developer, maybe ephemeral clusters at some point, right? And you may want to have the UI not to be on those, so they could, when they launch faster, right? Because there's a little bit of time if console's running in the cluster for it to come up, and then for the health checks to hit the endpoint saying, "Oh, hey, I'm working, I'm ready." So if you take that out, that'll speed up the cluster creation time a little bit. So that could be nice. I believe we already actually, Sully, you might know this better than me, but I thought we had a feature where you could disable the console from the cluster.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, composable OpenShift, it's one of the options you can disable.
Right, so that'll speed up your time to get your cluster, and then if you wanted after the fact, go launch cluster console onto it, or potentially you could run your console locally with these scripts that Sam and them provided. And let us know if this is something you want to do, where you run your console locally and reach out and connect to your different clusters. Let us know, and we could focus on making it a little bit more productized and enterprisey for our users. So, yeah.
Microshift is the perfect use case for this, for that, because Microshift does not have a console. And I was actually thinking about this yesterday, about just running the console like I'm doing now on my laptop and connect it to the Microshift that I have in order to see what's going on with it visually.
Yeah, or even, as Malek was just asking a moment ago, think home lab type scenarios, or even, single node OpenShift edge use cases of, I don't want to consume that extra. I know the console isn't exactly heavyweight, but sometimes every CPU cycle, every kilobyte of memory counts. It was just an interesting thought. I did not know that this was possible, and I'm fascinated by it. So
the other use case that keeps running in my head is, what if we deployed console, or made it easy to deploy console from Podman Desktop, right? Users have Podman Desktop already. They just say, okay, here's my cluster URL and preconfig, connect, and then the web console comes up and they can do whatever they want that way as well.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Anyway, sorry. Thank you for indulging my tangent. I appreciate it. Now I have some experimentation to do.
Okay, but you can see the console here that I'm running, which is the development console that's running on localhost 9000, right? So very easy to get up and running. And Sam's template has all this built in as well, so it's easy to start with. Yeah, and then from a code perspective, if you get the nav page, which essentially provides the overarching experience. You can see the different pages corresponding to these tabs that I showed you for the application set, details, YAML, generators, etc. And these just basically map to React components again. So this is the details page, and I'm essentially setting that up. One of my gripes with the console is essentially they don't provide a standardized kind of two-pane details view. It was kind of took me some time to figure out how to emulate it and make it look like the console. But I think that was addressed in a later release of the SDK, when now they have an extension point to just add items on the left or right panes or columns of the details view. So you don't necessarily have to build a complete details view like I'm doing here. Is that correct, Sam?
Yeah, that's right. We tried to make this a little easier. So if you just need to add a few items like into the existing list, you can do that without having to recreate the entire page. That's what we recommend for most customizations.
Awesome.
Gerald, can I put you on the spot? Would you make some kind of small change to your code? And I just want to show people that when the plugins refresh, the toast notification or the notification they get.
Sure. Let me just go to, let's say, the nav page here. I was trying to find something that I don't localize where I can just change a string really easily, but you know what? I'll break it. Let's just say I break this. I didn't put the S on application. We'll save that. And then if I go to localhost back here, nope, that's not it.
I appreciate your clacky keyboard, Gerald.
Oh, thank you. Go look at this. So you see now it says application. And if I go back and change it to applications, save it. Now it says applications. Right? So that just shows how you can make code changes and iterate very quickly. Is that what you're looking for, Ali?
That was actually not what I was looking for. But what I was looking for is when a plugin is deployed, right? How do you know? And we actually get a little alert at the very top that says, "Hey, your plugin has been updated. Please refresh the screen."
Yeah, for that, I would change the version if I want to get that little message. So in the plugin metadata, there is a version that you can provide. I don't know if it'll pick it up on the iterative one, but let's just try it. If I change that to 4.0, and go back here. Yeah, I'm not sure it'll pick it up without a recompile, Ali, that particular one. Sam would know better, but
Yeah.
what
you need
Ali's
to build an image and
Yeah.
deploy it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that would take too much time. But there'll be an alert box that will show up here saying, "Hey, there's been a change to the web console. Now you need to refresh it." Actually, the easier way to do that, Ali, would just be to go to administration, cluster settings, and just remove a plugin.
Sure.
Right.
Let's see.
I think most of us have probably seen it when we do a cluster upgrade too.
Yeah,
Usually
so if
every
I
time you do an update, you
Right.
prompt.
Yeah.
turn off that one, which is not mine.
Anytime console changes, whether it's you're customizing the configuration, it needs to be refreshed. Whether you're removing or adding or updating a plugin, you get that nice toast notification, and that goes to everyone using the console, not just Gerald who's making the change. Right, so it gives you a chance to refresh and see the new capabilities.
I was hoping it would pop up, but it did not pop up for me yet. Sometimes it takes a minute or two to do it. So we'll kind of wait.
Yeah, it might take a moment. There it is.
So what's nice here is like, imagine you're in your operator hub and you're like, you know what? I want to install OpenShift virtualization. You go and you install OpenShift virtualization operator. That will also deliver a plugin with the operator, and users will now be informed there's new capabilities on the cluster and there's a new plugin, and please refresh, and it loads that UI for, say, OpenShift virtualization. So it's just a nice little letting people know that there's something newer and that they can take advantage of with a quick refresh.
And so this is a question for Sam or Gerald. So Cyberstep, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. One of the challenges I've had in trying to write a plugin is being new to React/TypeScript and how to handle dependencies. Any references or tutorials you have or you can suggest? And then kudos to Sam for the template.
Yeah, I think the best references are all the plugins that we've written in Red Hat. Like if you want to see real examples of plugins, like Kubert is a great one. We probably have about a dozen, and of course it's Red Hat, so we open source just about everything, right? And we've been using, since we added the ability to write plugins, we've been using that internally. And it's helped us out a lot inside of Red Hat because we've got a lot of different teams that want to contribute to the UI. We've got a lot of teams that are working on operators that don't want to extend contribute code directly to console. They want to be able to deliver their plugin as part of the operator. They want to be able to deliver things on a different schedule, on their own release schedule, separate from OpenShift. So they write their own plugins. So we've been drinking our own champagne, and all these plugins are out there on GitHub, open source. And we're starting to add more and more links to READMEs in the repo to try to give you more examples. I think specifically for plugin development, those are the best to look at. We've got some ones that are pretty simple, and we've got some ones that are really involved that do a lot of different things. So I mean, that's where I'd start. And in general, React TypeScript, there's a bit of a learning curve for that. There are a lot of resources out there on the web. It's definitely different if you've done mainly backend development. The world of front-end development can be a little crazy. It changes fast. But I would encourage you to look at all the various plugins that Red Hat's developed. Feel free to reach out if you'd like some links. We can help you with that.
Can we actually go to the README for the plugins?
Yeah, let me try to dig it up. I know we've added some links recently to a few examples.
This one, Ali, or a different repo?
This is, keep scrolling down.
That's as far as it goes.
Not that one.
The console template one?
Not in the console template one. It is actually part of the OCP console.
Oh, console.
Yeah, so go to the console repo. So it's a little bit hidden, people. We need to improve on that as well.
Yeah.
Scroll. Yeah, go ahead.
Oops, sorry, I was in the
I
front end.
I appreciate that we're reinforcing Sam's point here of everything is open source. So, go to GitHub and you can look and see exactly how Red Hat does it if you so choose.
I don't see much in the main. There's
There should be a link to the SDK page from.
Oh, this one here.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Sam, would you remember? And your screen is so small, I'm like squinting to look at it.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. I think this is opportunity for us to better socialize a lot of these plugins.
This one. This is it. This is what
there
I was
you
looking
are.
for.
Yeah.
So this is, if you look at it, there's a question on the side about, hey, what about dependencies and versioning a little bit? You can come here and see which version of the SDK is supported with the console. You'll see stuff in here like, we try to stay backwards compatible, but we had to, can't always do that. So we had some pattern flag changes. So we had to make changes there. React router. If you go further down, maybe it'll show. Yeah, so there's a pattern flag version, and then there's the shared modules that we use. So that should help you figure out what the dependencies that you need and what version you're going for. So here's a question for Sam. Let's say I am a plugin developer and I want to support multiple versions of OCP. And, let's say there's a breaking change between the two. So you recommend that I create two versions of my plugin, or what would you recommend to be able to support cross, OCP releases?
Right. So we've been very careful to not break folks. The plugin APIs we provided, we've never removed an API for the Red Hat provided ones. The one place where you might run into issues potentially is with some of our dependencies, like if React itself introduces a breaking change and we update React in a future console version, that could introduce a problem. But in general, we've tried to keep plugins forward compatible. So if you want to support multiple console versions, you write a plugin for the oldest version you want to support, and it should keep working with newer versions. With the one caveat that we might have a breaking change in the future around dependencies. The one thing I say is if you pick the oldest version, you'll get the APIs that are available, not that version. If you try to use newer APIs, if you pick the most recent console SDK version, you might use newer APIs that aren't available in older versions. It is possible to have multiple plugins for different OpenShift versions if you want to do that. If you want to start making use of new features, but you want to keep your support for older console versions. And inside the plugin, we have a manifest that says, this particular plugin works with these console versions, where you give it like a symbol range of versions you want to support. So that is an option for things like, so we do have some shared libraries that we make available to plugins, such as Patternfly, which provides all the widgets we use for our UIs in Red Hat. We try to make multiple versions of those packages, multiple major versions available. So if you're, we have Patternfly 4 and we add Patternfly 5, which has some breaking changes. We have both Patternfly 4 and Patternfly 5 available in the most recent console versions to give you time to upgrade and so that your plugin doesn't break.
Yeah, for me, I'm doing, every time there's a new release of OpenShift, I create a new branch in my repo and then update everything for the new version, mostly just for the new APIs.
Yep. Yeah. And that's another way to do it. Like if you have an operator, your operator can deploy multiple versions of the plugin, and the right one gets picked up based on what you put in the package manifest to say that where your compatibility is. And then you're free to use whatever new APIs are available with, whatever new libraries are available.
So I see that we have a question in the side panel, and this was asking about, hey, can I send emails? Or
Yeah.
is there a method for us to send the alerts via email in OpenShift?
Yeah. So I just linked to the docs for configuring alert receivers, which includes SMTP. So hopefully that'll answer the question. I can show it real quick if we'd like, but
Yeah, I have it enabled on mine too. Not email though, Slack for me.
yeah. Yeah, it's relatively straightforward. You go to the alert manager configuration, and it's Prometheus under the covers. So Prometheus alert manager is what it's using. So you follow the configuration for that more or less. Our open OCP4 master node is restarting abruptly. Events say GC failed. I'm assuming GC is garbage collection. I wonder if that's garbage collection can mean memory sometimes or file system, depending on what it's doing. But
Or etc.
Yeah. Minvinder, I would definitely suggest opening a support case if you haven't already, so that way they can root cause and find out what's going on there. Because control plane nodes rebooting that's not good. That's not healthy,
Yeah.
so to speak. Ronald, just to follow up, and I put this into chat there. So I took our little conversation here, your comments up above, and I literally screenshotted them and sent them over to the product manager for Migration Toolkit for Virtualization. So once they get back to me, I will, or if they get back to me while we're here on the stream and say, oh yes, we already have this, and here is the Jira issue, I'm happy to share that, or just follow up with me an email. So which I didn't do my normal spiel here at the beginning, which is, I know a lot of people don't watch us live, or they'll listen to us just like a podcast. You're always welcome to reach out to Jonny and I via email if you have any questions that come up if you're not watching us live or you're watching us after the fact. So very easily, I am Sully, SULLY at redhat.com, or Jonny is JONNY at redhat.com. And we're both... we know how to operate the internal Red Hat machine in order to help track down the right folks to get questions answered. So we're always happy to make those connections and get as much as we can done. Getting a lot of console timeouts. Sorry, I just got completely distracted by your comment there, Minvinder. Which is, I would expect that as control plane nodes bounce, they're hosting the pods that are the console. So if it has to move to a different node or something like that, it'll start causing issues. Same thing with the API servers, I would expect. If the API servers that it's pointed at or trying to use are on that control plane node, they become unavailable. If etcd has to elect a new leader, right? All of these things can contribute to that slowness and timeouts. A known memory leak for node controller. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think so. The team would we know about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like that's something that they would prioritize. Typically, it's API server is the one that likes to use gobs of memory and CPU. But I know that there's a lot of active work going on there in order to help control that. Because effectively, so API server, and I'll actually pick on Argo CD since Gerald, you're here. Tools like Argo CD set up a lot of watches inside of the API server to just to be notified when things are happening at the cluster level, and those watches consume API server resources. So the more of them you have, the more memory, the more CPU that the API server in particular is going to consume on the control plane nodes. I don't think Argo CD by itself is enough to take even a default install, bring it to its knees. But if you layer that on with other things, go ahead.
I always joke that if you have a problem with etc.d or the API server, Argo CD will be the canary in the coal mine. That is where you're going to first discover it or see it. Is if you see flaky behavior with Argo's interaction with the cluster, that's usually an indication of etc.d or API server being problematic for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of watches. Yep, that could be a good indicator. So yeah, I would suggest, definitely if API server is bouncing around, memory, stuff like that, either if you have the resources, continue to feed the beast, so to speak. Otherwise, reduce those for better or for worse. And then there is some, I would have to dig them up, and I don't know timeline. I want to say if you look at the what's next presentation, which is linked from it's red.ht/next and new. I'll put that right here in the link here. red.ht/next and new. So if you look at the what's next or the roadmap presentation, I want to say that there is an item in there for like improved API memory consumption or resource consumption, something like that. And that is referring to a lot of the efforts that they're making in order to reduce that resource utilization, particularly for watches, and make it more efficient. I know it's hard to throw out hard numbers, but because it varies based off of probably an unlimited number of factors. But I want to say like the numbers I've been seeing are like 25+% reduction in resources. So
I got a question for Sam. So if someone wants to make a feature request for the dynamic plugin framework, how would they go about that?
Right. To me, it's like any other RFP. Right? I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, we certainly have issues enabled on the Git repos. If you have questions or things you'd like to learn or request, that is one way to get in touch with us. But I think logging it as an RFP for a product is probably the best way to do that.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam.
all right. Well, I know it's a few minutes after the top of the hour. Gerald, I don't want to rush you, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to show.
I mean, I was just going through it as Sam was talking. There's also integrations with rollouts, Argo rollouts. So if you want to do progressive delivery and use a rollout instead of a deployment for your applications, so the UI has some support for that. I can't build a topology extension. I don't think there's enough extension points for it right now. I've talked with Ali about that. It's something hopefully that'll come in the future. But at some point, I'd love to see that. And there's an integration point with external secrets as well, which I'm using for my home lab. So I built a small view for that to make it available. The only thing I just want to kind of highlight is another extension point that's quite interesting to me is being able to add new items to the cluster inventory. So you can see here, I've got the applications, and I can see that one is in a suspended state, which is the rollout application. And same with the application sets. I can put my applications in here and show if there's one that has problems, and there is one I know that has a problem. So just to show some additional things that you can do with that extension point that the SDK provides. And that's about it in terms of a demo.
Cool. Awesome job. Thank you so much. That was very cool to see.
Yeah, it's super impressive, not just what you've created, but I think just how far we've seen the console plugins come along. And, I really appreciate, and, I think this is really cool. And even though I know it's flirting with the edges of what we, administrators kind of consider to be, normal, I really like the idea that we can, and Ali and Sam, you pointed out, like you can create your own perspectives of like, hey, my organization, I want to create sort of a custom experience that's tailored to just what my users need. All of that's more or less possible now, right? Particularly if you have some developer savvy or folks inside of the organization to help with that. So that's really cool. So with that, if anybody has any last minute questions while I'm rambling and thinking and all of that other stuff, please go ahead and post those into chat. As I said a moment ago, if you are not watching us live, if after we end the stream, if something comes to mind, please don't hesitate to reach out. Sully, Sully at redhat.com, or Jonny, Jonny at redhat.com. You can also find us over on the Kubernetes Slack team, which has an OpenShift users channel. So if you just go to, it is slack.kubernetes.io. From there, you can, if you aren't already a member, you can get an invite into that Slack channel. Go there and join a couple thousand of your closest OpenShift friends. So for the folks who were asking, and apologies, I think it was Malek, you were asking about OKD and stuff like that. if you're not already a member there, it's a great community of folks who use OKD and OpenShift and ask all kinds of questions. I think and he and I are both there. There's a ton of the other tech marketing folks. I don't know if you're there or not, Gerald, but there's a ton of folks that are there that can help answer questions. So,
Sully, I was going to say thank you so much for having us. You've been an awesome host.
Yeah,
And,
thank you.
There was one question there at the end about what info was I using for that demo. So that's running in my home lab environment, and I've got a few different clusters, but the one it was running on was a single node OpenShift running on a Ryzen 5950X machine with 128 gigs of RAM.
What was it? This has been ages ago. I think it was like one of the tech YouTubers. I want to say Linus Tech Tips or one of them, like built a new desktop for like Linus Torvalds to do like kernel compiles and stuff like that. And I think it was something like that, you know, running dozens and dozens of cores and, you know, hundreds of gigabytes of memory. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. This machine doubles as my gaming machine, right? So during the day, it runs OpenShift. At night, I'm playing games on it.
I love home labs because I do the same thing. I flip mine between like 2 or 3 different hypervisors and, you know, multiple different other desktop operating systems just as needed in order to do things. And, you know, it keeps me entertained, makes the kids scratch their head. Like, why are you doing that? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. I greatly appreciate you joining us today. And to the audience, thank you so much for spending an hour and a half almost with us. So again, if you have any questions, anything that comes up, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I know these 3 folks are super responsive on getting us answers to questions and stuff like that. So with that being said, normally I would rely on Jonny. I feel very I feel very awkward. You know, it's like I'm missing my watch or something without Jonny here. Normally I rely on Jonny to know what our calendar is. It's one of the things that he has. I didn't even ask. He just kind of took over all the scheduling and stuff. And so he knows what's coming up next. I know we've got a number of things scheduled, but I won't go into that because I don't know. So we'll see. Will the cluster run on X Elites? I don't know what an X Elite is.
That's the Snapdragon X Elite, the ARM. Which I think is only on laptops right now. But I think that is ARM 64, so ARM OpenShift should hopefully run on it. But I'm just guessing. I've never tried it.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. Yeah, bring on the 9900X. Just more cores. All right, Joel. Thank you. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Sully.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well.